They said the land was cursed, but what they did to her that night was far worse than any curse. Eliza Thorne, 23 years old, a city girl who came back to a forgotten western town to find her family's roots. She arrived with nothing but a small silver bracelet that once belonged to her grandmother. The sky was pale gray, the wind heavy with dust, and every face she met looked at her like she had carried death in her pocket. No one spoke to her at first. They only stared. Then whispers spread through the crowd. The silver glint on her wrist caught the last light of day, and an old woman gasped, pointing with a shaking hand. "It's the cursed one." She brought it back. Before Eliza could even ask what they meant, a man grabbed her arm, then another. Rough hands pulled her toward the center of the field. Her cries mixed with the sound of cattle bells and barking dogs. The air was thick with panic. "Please, let me go. I don't even know what you're talking about." But they didn't listen. Fear never listens. They dragged her to an old wooden cross in the middle of a dead wheat field. The cross was splintered, wrapped with torn rope, and marked with soot from old fires. The villagers tied her wrists, binding them tight until her fingers went numb. Someone began mumbling a prayer. Others crossed themselves, and one man poured salt in a circle around her bare feet. The wind picked up. Dust cut across her face. Her hair whipped wild in the cold. She tried to shout again, but her voice cracked. They said it was to protect the town. They said the last time someone wore that silver bracelet. 3 families burned in a barn fire. They said she was the omen return, behind the fields, on a small ridge. A figure sat on horseback, watching. Jack Harland, 58, a worn-out cowboy who had lived on the outskirts of this same town for 20 years. His rough hands tightened on the saddle as memories of his family flickered in his mind. The locals called him the Ghost Rider. He had once had a wife and a boy, both lost in what people used to call the curse fire. Now he watched the same madness unfold again. His old horse shifted beneath him, snorting in the dust. Jack raised his hand and brushed its mane, eyes fixed on the girl. Her small frame trembled against the ropes, the silver bracelet flashing like a warning in the dim light. He felt something twist inside his chest. Not anger. Not pity. Something colder. The kind of fear a man carries when he realizes the past is repeating itself. He whispered, "Not again." The villagers stepped back, forming a loose circle. One of them raised a lantern. Its flame flickered orange across Eliza's face. For a moment, it looked like they might set her on fire. Jack gritted his teeth. He had seen this before. The same blind terror, the same lies whispered as prayers, and he remembered how it ended last time, with screaming, with ash, with graves. He pulled his hat low, hiding his eyes from the wind, and muttered to himself, "Goddamn fools, they still believe it." Then a sound broke through the night. Eliza's voice, weak but clear. "If I die here, will it end your curse?" The crowd went silent. The question hung heavy in the air. The old woman who had started it all took a step back. For the first time, someone looked unsure. Jack's grip on the saddle tightened. He could ride away and forget, or he could stop what he knew was coming. The lantern flame wavered. The rope strained against Eliza's wrist. The sky turned darker, and the last light of day sank behind the hills. Jack exhaled slow. His horse pawed the ground, and in that moment, he knew he couldn't stay silent again. Because if he did, another innocent would burn for a lie. As he nudged his horse forward, the wind carried her faint whisper, a prayer, or maybe a curse, and for the first time in 20 years, Jack Harland aimed to find out the difference. But what if the curse everyone feared wasn't the one haunting the land at all? The sound of a rifle cracked through the night. One shot, sharp, clean. The villagers froze. The lantern dropped to the ground and shattered, spilling light across the dirt. From the darkness, Jack Harland rode in slow, his hat low, his old rifle resting steady in one hand. "Untie her." His voice was calm, almost lazy, but it carried weight. No one moved, so he fired again. This time into the air. The echo rolled across the field like thunder. A few men ran, the rest backed away, muttering about the devil coming for them. When the last one left, only Eliza and the old cowboy remained. Jack climbed down from his horse, his boots sinking into the dry soil. The girl looked small, her wrists raw and her face streaked with tears and dirt. He muttered, Never thought I'd play hero again." He pulled out a knife, cut the ropes, and caught her before she fell. "Easy now," he said softly. "You're safe." She tried to stand, but her legs gave out. He lifted her, placed her on the saddle, and led the horse toward the canyon road. The sky was darker now, heavy with wind. They reached a small cabin hidden behind a line of pines. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and leather. Jack wrapped her in a blanket and poured water from a tin cup. Eliza's voice came out broken. "Why did they do that to me?" Jack didn't answer right away. He stared at the bracelet still shining on her wrist. "People get scared," he said. "And when they're scared, they need someone to blame." Her breath grew shaky, her hands clutching her side. Pain twisted across her face. Then she whispered something strange, barely a breath. "Go deeper. Make it quick inside." Her voice faded into a sob. Jack's eyes narrowed at the silver bracelet. Jack blinked, unsure if she was awake or talking nonsense from the pain. Still, he reached out, set his rough hand on her shoulder. "You'll be all right. Kid, you just need rest." For a moment, her eyes met his. There was fear in them, but also something else. Trust. He saw flashes of another time, his own daughter, crying by the fire, asking him why people called them cursed. He swallowed hard, pushed the memory down, and adjusted the blanket around Eliza. Outside, the wind rattled the window. A loose shutter clapped against the wall like a heartbeat. Jack sat back in his chair, staring at the dying flames. He knew this wasn't over, because the girl wasn't the only one haunted by that bracelet. And when dawn came, he'd have to choose whether to bury the past or finally dig it up. The next morning came slow and gray, the kind of morning that smelled like rain and regret. Jack stepped outside, coffee in one hand, eyes scanning the ridge. The world was quiet, almost too quiet. Inside the cabin, Eliza sat by the fire, turning the silver bracelet over in her hands like it held every answer she wanted. "Who's S. Crow?" she asked. Jack turned. The name hit him like a cold wind. "Silas Crow," he said. "Used to own that old farm you were tied to." She frowned. "So he's real." "Real enough," Jack replied. "And trouble enough, too." By noon, they were riding out. The fields stretched wide and empty, broken only by the sound of the wind scraping through dry grass. Jack didn't talk much. He never did. But he kept one hand near his gun, just in case. They reached the farm. The place looked forgotten. The barn roof half gone, the windmill leaning, the air still carrying that burnt smell of old tragedy. Eliza slid off the horse and walked toward the porch. Something creaked inside. "Stay close," Jack said. An old man stepped out from the shadow, white beard, eyes sharp as a hawk. Silas Crow. "You shouldn't have come back here," Silas said. Jack's jaw tightened. "Maybe you should have told folks the truth 20 years ago. Silas laughed, low and bitter. "Truth don't feed a town, cowboy. Fear does." Before Jack could answer, two men came from behind the barn. Farmhands, rough and nervous. One carried a shovel, the other a short blade. "Looks like you brought friends," Jack muttered. The fight was quick and dirty. Jack swung first, fist catching the taller man square on the jaw. He grunted, old bones creaking, but his aim stayed steady. Eliza grabbed a wooden stick, swung it hard, and missed, but it scared the second man long enough for Jack to knock him down. When the dust settled, Silas stood frozen, breathing heavy. Eliza noticed a book on the porch, its pages yellow and brittle. She picked it up, a diary. Inside were words that changed everything. The mine collapse, the lies, the townsfolk who covered it up by inventing the curse. Eliza's hands trembled as she read aloud. It was no curse, just men too afraid to face their own mistakes. Her bracelet wasn't evil. It was a gift for a lost child. Jack stared at the page. The truth hit him hard. His family had died in that same mine, and all these years, he'd blamed ghosts that never existed. Eliza touched his arm gently. "It wasn't your fault," she said. For the first time, he didn't argue. He just looked at her and nodded. "Maybe you're the daughter I never got to raise," he added quietly, his voice thick with unspoken years. Outside, the wind howled again, but it felt different now. Lighter, like the land itself had exhaled. If you're still here listening, take a slow sip of your tea and tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? And hey, if this story pulled you in even a little, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens when Jack decides whether to forgive or to burn it all down. That night, the fire burned bright outside Jack's cabin. The wind carried the smell of pin and old smoke. Jack and Eliza stood close to the flames, the diary and the silver bracelet lying between them. Eliza held the bracelet in her palm. It glimmered softly under the firelight. No longer something cursed, just metal and memory. Jack nodded toward it. "Go on," he said quietly. She hesitated for a moment, then tossed it into the fire. The flames hissed and flared, swallowing the silver whole. The sound was small but final. Silas Crow stood a few yards away and leaning on his cane. His face looked hollow, but his eyes were calm. He didn't say a word. When the bracelet was gone, he simply turned and walked into the darkness. Maybe he was ready to disappear with the lie he had lived for too long. Eliza watched until he was gone. "Do you think he's sorry?" she asked. Jack poked the fire with a stick. "Some men are sorry too late," he said. For a while, they just sat there, no words, just the sound of the fire and the wind running through the trees. Then Jack looked at her and said, "You ever ridden a horse before?" She smiled faintly. "Not unless you count carousels." The next morning, Jack saddled his old horse and brought out another one that hadn't been ridden in years. Its fur was dusty, its eyes patient. "You'll learn on this one," he said. He helped her climb up, steadying her with one hand. As she found her balance, he walked beside her, one hand on the reins. "My boy used to fall off this mare a dozen times before he got it right," Jack said, a rare smile breaking through his weathered face. "My wife used to ride here every morning," he said. "Our boy would chase her down the fence line, laughing so loud the birds would stop singing." Eliza looked down at him. "What happened to them?" Jack's voice softened. "The mine, the same one that collapsed. Folks said it was the curse, but I know better now." He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carried both pain and peace. "Guess I just needed someone to remind me that life keeps moving, even after it kicks you flat." The horse took another step forward. The morning sun cut through the fog, warm and golden. Eliza laughed as she almost lost balance, and Jack caught her arm. For the first time in years, he laughed too. But deep inside, both of them knew the past wasn't done with them yet. And what waited beyond that sunrise might be the hardest truth of all. The sun rose soft and golden across the valley. The world that once felt cursed now looked almost gentle. Eliza and Jack stood by the fence, watching the horses graze in the distance. The old boards creaked under Jack's boots as he leaned forward, hands resting on the rail. "You think you'll stay?" he asked. Eliza smiled. "For a while. Someone's got to keep you out of trouble." Jack chuckled. That low cowboy laugh that came from deep in the chest. "I guess that means I'm stuck with you then." For a moment, silence took over. Only the sound of wind, the rustle of grass, and the quiet rhythm of life starting again. Jack turned to her. "You know, for years I thought this land hated me. Thought maybe it was punishing me for something I didn't do, but it wasn't the land. It was me. I was the one who couldn't let go." He tapped the fence post with his knuckles, as if testing its strength, then added, "And you showed me it's still standing." Eliza nodded. "We all carry ghosts. Some louder than others." He looked at her then, his weathered face soft in the morning light. "You remind me that even the worst scars fade if you stop picking at them." She smiled. "Guess we both learned something." Jack stepped closer to the fire pit where the ashes of the bracelet still lay. He picked up a handful of cold dust, let it fall between his fingers. "Funny thing," he said. "All those years folks feared a curse, but turns out the only real curse is believing in one." The wind caught the last bit of ash and carried it across the field. Eliza watched it drift away, glowing for a second in the sunlight before it disappeared. "Looks like even the ghosts need a place to rest," she murmured, her voice soft against the breeze. They saddled up and rode out together, the land stretching wide and endless before them. No ghosts, no fear, just life, as it should be. The camera could almost follow them from behind. Two riders, moving toward the horizon, toward something new. Maybe that's the point, isn't it? That sometimes the worst thing we face isn't what others say about us, but what we start believing ourselves. Maybe every curse is just a story waiting for someone brave enough to rewrite it. And maybe somewhere in your own life, there's a truth you've been too scared to dig up.